They don't want love. They want the illusion of it, the shape, the mask, the comfort, but not the raw, terrifying, soul-ripping truth of what love really is. Marriage is easier to control, and if you think that's cynical, stay, because what they're chasing isn't a person. It's a performance. You were never the partner. You were the prop. They wanted marriage, the ring, the photos, the applause, but not the depth, not the silence between two people when nothing is perfect, and yet no one runs. Because here's the truth. Love is inconvenient. It ruins timelines. It exposes wounds. It doesn't make sense on paper. But marriage can be planned. It can be branded. It can be controlled. And that's what they really wanted. Control. You felt it, didn't you? The way they spoke about the future, like it was a checklist. The wedding, the house, the kids, the scripted milestones. But where were you in that script? Not your soul. Not your softness. Not your rage. Your dreams. Your past. Just your role. You were never chosen for who you are. You were casted for what you could provide. Stability. Image. Legitimacy. A box to check so they could feel whole. They said, "I love you," but what they meant was, "I love how you fit into the story I already wrote for myself." And if you changed, if you grew, if you asked for more than surface-level security, they pulled away, withdrew affection, punished you for becoming real. Because love is unpredictable. Marriage, for them, is not. Love threatens identity. Marriage cements it. Love says, "See me." Marriage says, "Approve of me." And now you're wondering, was it ever real? Did they ever see you? Or were they just chasing a lifestyle? The dream, the Instagram caption, the dinner parties, the pride of saying we. They wanted someone to arrive at the finish line with, but they didn't want to bleed through the training. They wanted a partner in optics, not in pain. They smiled when you looked stable. They recoiled when you broke open. They didn't want your truth. They wanted your performance. And here's what hurts. You gave it. You gave the version of yourself you thought would finally be loved enough to be kept. But all it did was feed their delusion of what love is supposed to look like. They didn't want intimacy. They wanted efficiency. And marriage gave them that. Rules, roles, contracts, a socially approved container for their insecurity. But love is dangerous to those who fear being seen. Love will tear through your ego. Love will destroy what's false. And they couldn't survive that. So they chose marriage. Not to honor love, but to avoid it. They dressed up convenience as commitment. And when you finally asked for more presence, more passion, more truth, they called you difficult, unreasonable, too emotional. But really, you were just done being a shadow in their show. You wanted connection. They wanted confirmation. You were building a bond. They were building a brand. So now the silence hurts. The distance, the hollow rituals. But listen, this isn't your failure. It's their fear. They never wanted love. They wanted something that looked like it, acted like it, but never demanded their transformation. And you were always going to be too real for that, because you can't be half alive to make someone else feel whole. So, if this is resonating, if your chest feels tight, your memory's spinning, then it's not in your head. You were not loved poorly because you were unworthy. You were loved poorly because they were unready. Marriage, not love. That's what they sought. And the tragedy? They probably still don't know the difference. Comment. Angels say prophecy. If you've seen this truth with your own eyes, if you've lived it, if you've escaped it, or if you're still healing from it, and now you're left holding the pieces of something you thought was sacred, you replay the moments, the way they lit up when others were watching, the way their voice softened in public, but turned cold behind closed doors. You wonder if it was ever real, or just rehearsed, because they needed you to be their proof, that they were lovable, that they were successful, that they could win at life. You became their trophy, their stability, their justification for not doing the deeper work. But love doesn't need an audience. It lives in the hidden moments, the raw ones, the ones that never make it to social media, the ones that don't sparkle, but heal. And they didn't want those moments. They flinched when things got messy, when you cried, when you screamed, when you needed, not because you were too much, but because your vulnerability exposed their emptiness. And maybe you thought, if I just love them harder, if I just become easier, if I just wait, they'll change. But they didn't, because they weren't trying to love you. They were trying to preserve the version of themselves they wanted the world to see. And you were collateral. So now you're grieving someone who's still alive, grieving a connection that never really started, not because you were naive, but because you were true. You showed up in full color. They wanted grayscale. You brought a storm. They wanted still water, because storms require presence. Still water just needs a frame. And here's the sharp edge. They may move on quickly. They may marry someone else. They may post the photos, buy the house, live out the script. But you will never be forgotten, because you cracked something open in them, something they've already buried. And one day, maybe late at night, maybe during an argument, maybe in silence, they'll remember the one who was real, the one who offered love, not just marriage. And by then, you'll be long gone, not bitter, not broken, but finally whole, because you saw the difference between being chosen for your presence and being picked for your position, between love and the performance of it. And now you see it everywhere. In the couples who smile too hard, in the friends who settle for comfort, in the families who say, "We're fine," when everything is falling apart. They don't want love, because love asks for truth, and truth requires loss. Loss of ego, loss of certainty, loss of control. So they choose marriage, because it gives the appearance of forever without asking for transformation. But not you. You've been through the fire. You know the cost of real love. And you're no longer for sale. Not to those who want your compliance, but not your chaos. Your beauty, but not your grief. Your smile, but not your rage. You are no longer a vessel for their fantasy. You are the storm they feared, and the freedom they'll never forget. Comment. Angels say prophecy. If you've walked through this war and lived, they'll tell you it's about love. They'll swear it, with their hands on your face, their vows dripping with conviction, their eyes rehearsed. But it's not love they're after. It's safety. It's status. It's the illusion of permanence. Because love asks questions. Marriage, for them, provides answers, even if they're lies. They don't want the tension of growing beside someone. They want the comfort of locking someone in. So you don't leave. So they don't have to evolve. And when you started asking for real connection, when you started showing your shadow, your scars, your story, they froze, because that wasn't in their blueprint. You were supposed to stay simple, predictable, digestible. You were never meant to become complex. But love requires complexity. It demands that we confront ourselves through the mirror of another soul. Marriage, in their version, avoids that mirror. It replaces it with a frame, nice, polished, symmetrical, easy to hang on a wall, easy to show off, hard to see through. You remember, don't you? The way they clung to tradition, but resisted vulnerability. The way they feared being alone, but were terrified of being known. Because to be known means to risk rejection. To be known means to drop the act. To be known means to admit you don't have it all figured out. And they couldn't bear that. So they chose the structure, the ring, the script, because it looked like love. And that was enough for them. But not for you. You wanted the kind of love that unravels you, that forces you to choose each other, again and again. Not because you have to, but because your souls remember each other. You wanted the kind of love that doesn't rely on paperwork to feel permanent, that doesn't hide behind routine, that doesn't use children to fix what was always fractured. You wanted more, and they called it too much. But you know now, you were never too much. They were too small for the magnitude of you. They shrunk the definition of love so they could fit inside it, without changing. And when you didn't shrink with them, they made you feel like the problem. But hear this, they didn't reject you. They rejected the depth in you that they were too afraid to touch. Because once you taste truth, you can't go back to pretend. And you are always the truth. So if you're aching, if you're replaying the lies, if you're mourning a life you almost had, let it burn. Not because it meant nothing, but because it wasn't whole. You were building a cathedral. They were building a facade. And the collapse? That wasn't a failure. It was the sacred making room for something real. They keep showing up in your mind. Moments, looks, phrases, not because you miss them, but because some part of you is still trying to solve it. Still trying to understand how something that felt so warm left you so cold. And the answer is simple, but it will break something in you to hear it. You were never loved. You were used to feel loved. They wanted to feel chosen, but they never wanted to choose you. They wanted the high of being wanted, the validation, the certainty, but not the responsibility of seeing you fully, holding your pain, or walking with you into the parts of yourself you were still learning to love. They wanted the symbol of intimacy, not the soul of it. And if you're honest, you always knew. There were cracks in their words, delays in their touch, a distance behind their affection, like they were always half somewhere else. And still, you stayed, because you saw their potential, because you thought your love could awaken them, because you mistook attachment for destiny. But listen, attachment grows from hunger. Love grows from presence. And they were never present. They were performing, checking the boxes, wearing the mask of committed, but they never invited you to take it off together. You see, real love doesn't wait for comfort to give connection. It creates connection, even when it's uncomfortable. But they shut down. They blamed you for the tension. They called your needs too much, so they wouldn't have to admit they had nothing deeper to give. Because deep down, they weren't building a bond. They were building a story, one they could point to and say, "Look, I did it. I'm safe now. I'm enough now." They wanted marriage like a medal, to prove something to the world and to themselves. But you weren't trying to prove. You were trying to feel, to touch something sacred, to build something rooted in truth, not timelines. But truth terrifies the ones who've only ever known performance. And the day you stopped pretending, the day you stopped shrinking, they left, not because you failed, but because you refused to play along anymore. You stopped reciting the script. You stopped clapping for their illusion. You asked them to see you, and they couldn't, because seeing you would have meant seeing themselves. And they weren't ready for that. So they'll rewrite the story. They'll say, "You were unstable. You were needy. You asked for too much, but you weren't asking for too much. You were asking for something real." And now you carry both grief and clarity. Grief, because something you loved died. Clarity, because it was never alive to begin with. That ache in your chest, it's not for them. It's for the version of you that still hoped they would change. Let her go. She was innocent. She loved with open hands. But now you know, love without truth is just performance. And marriage without love is just paperwork. And when the silence settles, when the memories lose their sting, when you stop looking at their life from a distance, wondering if they ever look back, you'll realize something. You didn't lose love. You escaped the absence of it. You didn't fail to hold them. You simply refused to abandon yourself. And that was the turning point. Because now you see it clear. What they called love was transaction. What you offered was transformation. What they built was a cage. What you wanted was a kingdom. They could never go where you were headed. Not because they were evil, but because they were still afraid. Afraid to feel. Afraid to fall. Afraid to be found out. And you were never here to play safe. You were made to tear through illusions, to break generational patterns, to end the lineage of loveless survival stories. You are not here to be chosen by the blind. You are here to see yourself, to walk without begging, to stay without shrinking, to love without losing your fire. So let them go. Let the story rest. Let the silence speak the words they never could. And when real love finds you, it won't ask you to prove. It won't shame your softness. It won't flinch when your truth gets loud. It will stand in front of you, bare and willing, and whisper, "You were never too much. You were just too real for what was never real enough." This is your clarity. This is your closure. This is your freedom.